Hi everyone, welcome to the second session of Android Study Jams by GDSUVIT. So we are so happy to have you all on board for this amazing journey. Yeah, we will wait for some more time for more people to join in. Till then, how are you guys doing? Like, have you tried the things that we did in our first session on your own? I know some people have tried. Some were facing some issues, and we were trying to resolve it on the Telegram group. So really glad that you guys are trying things out on your own. Keep doing that. Keep completing the units from that course. I'll be showing that link once again today. If you guys haven't watched the first session for Android Study Jams, check out this YouTube channel itself. It is available there. You can watch the first session there. Yeah. Let me know in the chats how many units did you cover, how many left. How are you finding this course? Like, are you enjoying the journey? What all things did you learn? We'll be really happy to see your response. We will wait for a couple of minutes before we actually start the session. Also, all your doubts will be handled within chats for today's session. So feel free to post your doubts in the chat. The team will be there to help you out. Let's now start with our session. So once again, welcome everyone to the second session of Android Study Jams. What have we covered so far? We have covered Kotlin basics, plus some classes and inheritance concepts in Kotlin. Then we did introduction to Android Studio. Then we made birthday card app and finally the dice roller app. I hope you guys have tried this out on your own. This is the course that we are following throughout the program, Android Basics in Kotlin course, which can be accessed via this link g.co/android/basics. We will post this in the chat as well. And when you finish all 6 units, you will be getting all these badges added to your Google developer profile. And this is how we are going to track you that you completed all the 6 units. And this is required to be eligible to be recognized as a participant of Android Study Jams. And you have a great lot of opportunities this time as a participant of Android Study Jams, including 80% fee reimbursement for associate Android developer in Kotlin certification, which is really cool. I hope everyone will make use of this opportunity. This is the Telegram group for Android Study Jams this year, and we have been discussing a lot of things there, including your queries, doubts, errors that you're facing, and things like that. So if you haven't joined this group yet, make sure that you join this Telegram group. We will post the link to the group also in the chats. So these are today's topics. The first thing that we will do today is a tip calculator app where you will be getting an idea of how to use XML, which is a markup language, to design your screens for an Android app. Then we will do an affirmations app where you will get an idea about how to use recycler views, which are basically list views, but with much better performance. We will discuss on that. Then finally, we will move on to navigation, like navigating from one screen to another and different ways of doing that. We will explore that too. So these all are the topics for the day. Without spending more time, let's move on to the first topic for the day, which is XML for layouts. Okay, so let's start with the tip calculator app. So this is what it will look like after we build the app. It will have a text field where we can enter the cost of service and select how was the service and finally calculate the tip amount. There is also an option to select whether you need to round up the tip or not. So yeah, this all other functions that we are going to have within this app. And Let's start Android Studio. You can also code along with me so that we can resolve any issues that you're facing on the go. Let's start a new project and select empty activity and give the name of the app as let's say quick time. Okay, and everything else is same, and minimum SDK I'm giving as 21. It is building the app, building the project in fact. So it will take a little time when you're doing it for the first time. So this I'm showing this once again. This is what we are going to build. We will be using XML to design our layouts. So far we have been using layout editor for building the screens for our app. But right now we are going to use XML for this particular project. Okay, I think, yeah, it has created it. Let's move to activity main.xml. So far we have been working here inside this layout editor. So right now the design option is selected. Select the split option. Now you can see the XML file here and the screen on the right. We will be working on this XML text here, and let's remove this text view. And we have the constraint layout as the base layout, same as the previous projects. Okay, so what do we need here? We need a text field. So text fields are called edit text in Android. And for that, you can just type edit text and it will give you suggestions. You can just press enter. And for width, let's say we are giving 140 dp, and for height, we are giving wrap content. Okay, it is showing an error. We are familiar with this error because since it is inside a constraint layout, we need to set the constraints. We are going to, what we did till now is we were just dragging this handles to the start or end of the parent. You can still do the same thing. It will automatically add a line here, constraint start to start of parent. For the top, we are going to set it to parent as well. So let's type that out, top to top of parent. Okay, we have resolved the issue. You can still use these handles and drag and drop to get these constraints, or you can type this as we did just now. Then we have something called cost of service here, right? So this is called a hint. How do we write a hint here? This edit text has an attribute called hint, and you will be writing cost of service here. Okay. So we have written the hint as cost of service, and we are going to give the edit text an ID of et cost. Okay, I'm just pressing Control Alt L to format. It is a shortcut, Control Alt L. Okay. Next up, we have a text view. We're going to add text view like this. Just type a few letters of the word text view and you will be getting the suggestion. Let's just press enter and give wrap content, and text is, we're going to give the text as how was the service. So every attribute in the layout editor, you will be just going to this particular attribute and you click on this thing, you go to the attribute and type it down here. When you're writing in XML, you have to use this syntax, Android : followed by the attribute name, then its value, and between you have an equal sign here and the value here. So this is how you write in XML. It is very similar to other markup languages also. Yeah, now we have to set the constraints. So we want the top of this text view to the bottom of this edit text, right? If you notice here, this text view is just below the edit text. What we are going to do right now is we are going to set the top to bottom of, and we are going to give the ID instead of parent. We are going to give the ID of the coast. Yeah. And also we are going to set start to start off the same edit text. Okay. So we have added the edit text, the text view. Now we have a radio button or a group of radio buttons. So what is a radio button basically? So you can select only one among these three, right? So it is basically a radio group containing three buttons. So for that, we are going to add a radio group with 0 dp, and so 0 dp in constant layout is match parent. In other, match parent means just fill the entire parent, that's it. So height is going to be a wrap content. It is going to adjust according to the content. Also we have to set the constraints here. For that we are going to add an id for this text view, tv service text. Okay, and we are going to add the constraints here, top to bottom of tv service text, and start to start of you can give parent also here, it is not an issue. Okay, let's add some radio buttons. Also we need an id for this radio group so that we can access it in our Kotlin class. For that I'm giving rg choice. Okay, and for radio button I'm giving wrap content, and an id, let's say rb amazing, and the text is going to be amazing with 20%. So this is what we see here, amazing 20%. So what all did we do right now? We just added a radio group with an id and constraints. Then we added a radio button with the text amazing, just as we see here. And we just gave an id for this radio button as well. I'm just going to copy this radio button and make 2 copies. And I'm going to change the id to rb good and rb okay. And I'm going to change the text as well. Good is 18%, I guess. Then we have okay, which is 15%. Cool. So we added a radio group with 3 radio buttons, and next we have a toggle button here. So a toggle button is basically called a switch. So let's add a switch here. I'm going to use the switch combat from the Android X library, and I'm going to give 0 dp here and wrap content here. Why did I give 0 dp? Because as you can see here, it fills the entire width. So I'm giving 0 dp, and take a look at the constraints here. I'm going to give start to start of parent and end to end of parent. So right now it fills the entire width. So this is how you get the effect of match parent inside a constraint layout. You give width as 0 dp and then give start to start of parent and end to end of parent, then it just fills the entire width. So this is how you get this effect. Then we are going to have a text of what is the text again? We will just see roundup tip. Okay, roundup tip. So this is the text, and now we are going to set the constraints top to bottom of. We need this below the radio group, right? So RT choice. Okay, just formatting, Control Alt L. Okay, we have this switch as well. Right now we have completed the edit text view, this radio group, this switch, and we are now going to add the button. So we need an id for this switch as well. So I'm giving id sw round, so switch round. You can give whatever name you like. I'm just following this pattern. Now we need a button which also is 0 dp width because it needs to fill the entire width. Then height is going to be wrap content. and the text is going to be calculate, and ID is going to be btn calculate. And we are going to set the constraints now. We need top to bottom of that switch, and start of parent, and end to end of parent. Okay, now it fills the entire width. Then finally we need a text view to display the tip amount. So we are just going to add a text view with wrap content. I'm just giving a text tip amount here. I'm going to set the constraints, top to bottom of this btn calculate, and end to end of parent. Okay, so we have the text view here, and let's just increase the text size a little so that it is more visible. I'm giving an ID tv tip amount. Okay, so we have all the elements, the edit text view, radio group, the switch, the button, and the text view. We have all this thing. So let's give it some padding so that it doesn't look too much congested. Okay, we gave a 16 dp padding so that everything gets a little padding inside. So yeah, that's it from the XML point of view or the layout point of view. We have just set up the layout for our tip calculator app. I will give you like 2 minutes to catch up. Let us know in the chats if you are facing any issues or you have any doubts. Then we will move on to the Kotlin part, the logic part of this app. Okay, so now let's move on. When we come to the Kotlin part, so till now we have been using a function called find view by ID to refer the views inside your layout in your Kotlin file. In this project, we are going to use something different, something easier to implement and more efficient. So for that, just open build.gradle and add this following lines below this Kotlin options. Build features, and within curly braces, view binding space true. So we are going to use something called, and also now press the sync now button. Let the project sync with the Gradle. Okay, so what we are going to do right now is we are going to use something called view binding. So what is view binding basically? So now you don't need to call each view by using find view by ID and specifying the ID, and also having different objects for each text view or button inside your Kotlin class. You can just directly access these views using a binding object. So what is a binding? Basically, I will just show you. Inside this main activity, we are just going to have a variable called binding of type activity main binding. So if you're wondering where did this activity main binding come from, so activity main binding is a class automatically generated when we used view binding. So when we added this view binding true and then synced the project, it just created this activity main binding class automatically for us, and it will create similar classes for all activities that you're going to create within this application. So what is this binding? Basically, binding is like holding all the views. You can just access all your views within this activity without calling find view by ID each time. And yeah, I hope you have added view binding to your project and the Gradle sync is done. Okay, so you might have noticed this is a late init. Late init means you are giving a promise that you will initialize it in the future. before you use this binding. Actually, before you actually use this binding, you will be initializing it. So you are giving a promise. So after this super dot on create, let's initialize binding as activity main binding dot inflate. So there is a function called dot inflate inside the activity main binding, and we are going to pass layout inflator. So this is basically a getter. It is get layout inflator function available within this app combat activity. And instead of set content view r dot layout dot activity main, we are just going to pass binding dot root. So these are the changes that we did by adding view binding. Instead of directly inflating the setting the content view as the layout, we are just passing binding dot root, and we are using this activity main binding class to inflate our layout. So yeah, let's see what is the benefit of doing this. So earlier, if we needed to set an on-click listener for a button, first you need to create an object of a button, then initialize it as that name is equal to find view by ID and give the ID of that button, then set a click listener for that object. So right now what you can do is you can directly use binding dot, and you can see there are already a lot of options available here, and that this seems a little similar, right? Familiar. So where did these come from? When you go to activity main .xml file, you see these IDs et underscore coast, and when you come inside the main activity, see this et coast is referring to this particular edit text. So you have underscores here, and this will be named like et coast with C capital. So this is the naming convention. All your IDs will be converted to these kind of names, so you can directly access those UI elements here. Right now we need a button, so we need to access that calculate button. So what you can do is binding.btn calculate. So this btn calculate came from btn underscore calculate. As you can see here, the ID is btn underscore calculate, and here you can access it as btn calculate. And we are going to set click listener, set on click listener, and within curly braces. So we are going to get the cost. So let's have a variable called input amount is equal to, and here also we are to get data from that edit text. You are going to use binding dot et cost dot text dot toString. So this is now a string. What we need right now is a number, because we need to perform some calculation, right? So I'm going to convert this to double. There is two options, double or null, and double. I'm just going to use double or null. Why? Because if the user is going to enter, if the user didn't enter something and just pressed the calculate button, then it should give us null. So I am using this to double or null function. Now I'm checking if input amount equal to null, then you should set the tip amount to an empty string, right? So for that, I'm going to use binding.tv tip amount. So that is this text view here. Dot text is equal to an empty string, and I'm going to return the click listener here, because I don't want to continue if the input amount is null. So if the input amount is not null, what we are going to do right now is we are going to get the percent. So val percent is equal to, and we are going to use the when statement here, which we used in our previous projects, previous apps as well. When binding dot rg choice dot, we need to get the selected ID, right? So we are going to use checked radio button ID. So there is a function called, this RG choice is this radio group, not a single radio button. This whole group is RG choice, and we are going to use the function called checked radio button ID. So it will just return which the ID of the radio button which is checked. And so when what we are doing right now is, it is very similar to a switch case. So we are just checking each possibility for this checked radio button ID. So if it is r.id.rb amazing, the person should be 0.20. If it is rb good, it should be 0.18, and else it should be 0.15. So what are we doing here? We are just calculating percent according to the checked radio button. So if amazing is selected, we are going to set the percent value as 0.20. If you are going to if good is selected, it's 0.8. Else means it is okay. So okay has the value 0.15. So we are setting the value of percent according to the selected quality of service. And after this, we are calculating tip amount as input amount times percent. And then we have to check whether the user has selected to round up the tip. So for that, we are going to use if binding dot sw round dot is checked, tip amount is equal to, I'm going to use kotlin.math.seal, a function. So what is the seal? It is just round up. So if you want to round down, it is floor. Okay, so we are going to seal tip amount. Okay, so we need this to be a variable because we need to change this if this is checked. So we are going to use variable. So I think you might be familiar with this right now, var and val. Val means you cannot edit the value later. Var means it can be changed. Okay, and now we are going to set tip amount as the tip amount that we calculated, and you have to use toString because this is a number right now and we can set only strings as text. Let's now try running this and let's see whether everything is working fine. I'm running on an emulator right now. You can also run on a physical device, which will be faster than an emulator. So it's up to you. If you are having a slightly less graphics, or if you are having any issue running on the emulator, you can always try running on a physical device also. It will be faster for sure. Okay, so we just ran our tip calculator app. Let's try entering some cost here. Let's say 230 and select amazing and calculate. It calculated as 46. And now let's use something like 123 or something and calculate. It is 24.6. Let's select round up tip here now and calculate. It just rounds up to 25. Okay, so everything is working. Let's try good. Let's try okay. So everything is working fine. So yeah, we built our tip calculator app. Let's try one more thing inside the XML file. Just go to this edit text, and there is one attribute called input type. Let's give it as number. There are a lot of options here. You can try it. For this particular thing, we are going to give number decimal. So why are we giving number decimal? Because we need only numbers to be entered in this text field, right? So it will also be easier from a user experience perspective that the keyboard will be having only the option of numbers to enter. So right now, yeah, we have only numbers, so it is comparatively easier to enter amount in this manner, right? Yeah, it is working. Cool. So we built the tip time app for calculating tip according to the cost and quality of the service. And that we also had an option to round up or down the tip. Cool. So as we saw in the previous apps, we should always try to have our strings not hard coded. We should have it inside the strings.xml file. So for that, I'm just going to press Alt Enter, and click extract string resource and just click OK. It will automatically add a value to strings.xml file. If you want to check that out, you can go to res values and strings.xml, and it will add a string automatically. I'm going to do the same for every hard-coded strings. And let me show you something else. Instead of giving text, you can give something like tools text is equal to tip amount, and I'm going to remove this. So it shows in this preview, right? Let's try running this now. Okay, so you can see this text inside this preview, but not in the actual app. So what is the use of this? If you want to just have an idea of how this text will look like with the actual content, you can always use this tools text instead of directly giving Android text. So this will only be shown inside this preview, but not inside the actual app. But when you calculate the amount, it will show the tip amount here. So you can use tools text for that. Okay, so we just added every resource to the strings.xml file. This is a good practice to follow. Yeah, I will give you like 3 to 4 minutes to catch up so that we are on the same page. I'll just quickly go through this Kotlin file right now. We just initialized the binding file. So activity main binding is a class automatically generated. And you're just inflating by getting a layout inflator and setting the content view as binding.root. Then if you want to access any of the UI elements or any of the views, you can always use binding.btn calculate. So this name came from the ID of this particular view. Similarly, we have accessed binding.etcost, binding.tvtipamount, and so on. We just set a click listener for this button. We got the input amount from the edit text. If the input amount is null, we just return the click listener after setting this tip amount as an empty string. And we calculated the percent according to the quality of service selected by the user. Then we calculated the tip amount by multiplying the input amount by the percent. Then if binding.sw round, so which means if the user has selected to round up the tip, you will round up using kotlin.math.ceil function. And finally, you are setting this binding.tvtipamount.text as the calculated tip amount. So in case you need to add a currency symbol here, let's say we have something called formatted tip is equal to, we're going to use something called number format dot get currency instance and dot format this tip amount that we have here. And we are going to set this formatted tip instead of this tip amount. Let's now try running this. We should get some currency symbol here according to the user's device. Yeah, we have a dollar symbol here right now, which is slightly better user experience. Cool. So we just added a currency symbol here. This number format dot get currency instance adds the currency symbol according to your user. Yeah, so finally we finished our tip calculator app. We just saw how to use view binding and how to use XML for building your layouts. I hope you guys are following. If you're having any issues, let us know in the chats. We'll be really happy to help you out. Okay, so before we move on to the next section, let's take a quick refresh at lists in Kotlin. So we have already discussed how lists are made in Kotlin. We'll just see what is the difference between a list and a mutable list. So for that, let's get to Kotlin Playground. You can access Kotlin Playground from developer.android.com/training/Kotlin Playground. And let's have a list here. Let's say variable var colors list is equal to list of type string red, green, and blue. Let's try printing this. Okay, so it just printed red, green, blue, which is a list. Let's try adding something to this list. So let's see if we can add something like this. Add, let's say, yellow. It is an error, unresolved reference add, because the list of type string or whatever type, the list does not have a option to add elements to it, which means lists are only you can only read from that. You cannot write or update something. It is fixed. It is not mutable. So in order to edit this list or to make this list editable, what you can do is you can write mutable list of. Then let's try running this. It added yellow, and now it printed this whole list with red, green, blue, and yellow. So this is the difference between a list and a mutable list. You can have a mutable list in order to update, delete, or remove elements from your list. If you're having only list, it is not mutable. It is just read only. So this is the difference between list and mutable list. Yeah, same thing here. Okay, next up we have recycler views, which will be a very interesting part of today's session. So you're going to use this very often in most of the projects that you are going to do. So before that, let's take a small break of 5 minutes and we will be back. So stretch out, guys, drink some water. We will be back in 5 minutes. Till then, we will be available on chats. If you are facing any issues or any doubts, you can always post it in the chats. We will be helping you out. Cool. Okay, now let's get back. Let's move on to the next section, recycler view. So what is a recycler view? Recycler view is basically a list view where you will be having a list of items arranged horizontally or vertically or in whichever fashion you like. And this is going to be one of the most frequently used thing in your app. When you're actually building an app, you are going to use one kind or another of a recycler view. And this is going to be used very often. So this is very helpful part of this session. Yeah. We are going to build an affirmations app to get some knowledge about recycler views and how adapters and item views and everything work. Okay, so these are basically some quotes, motivational quotes, and some images inside a card view. And this is a list. You can scroll down. This is how it will look like finally when we build the app. Okay, let's get to Android Studio without spending much time. Let's create file, new project. I'm selecting empty activity and the name of the application as affirmations. Okay, and everything else remain the same. Click finish. It is building the app. Also, I have copied these things into a notepad so that we don't spend much time on typing everything down. I will share the link to this notepad in the chats, so you can also copy paste this. Okay, the project is ready. The first thing that we are going to do right now is go to res, values, and strings.xml, and we're just going to copy these text into that file. I'm just closing the old project. Okay, so these are the text that should be shown in each list item here. And we are just having a static data set for now. Okay, so we have 10 quotes. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 3 packages inside this com.dev.g1 So this will be your package name. So this is my package name for this particular app. So in your project, you will be having your package name. You can go to this and click on right click, then new and package. I'm going to name the first one model. I'm creating another package called data and another one called adapter. I'll explain why we are creating these packages. You can always keep all the files wherever you like inside the project, but why are we creating separate packages for all this? We are going to put files with similar functionalities inside a package so that the code is more organized and you will get a better idea when you're reading it later. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to add a new file to this model package. So what is a model? A model is basically like a blueprint. So how the data for this app is going to look like? What is the structure of the data? So the data here is an image and a text. So this is the model of the data that you have. And this model is repeating throughout this list, right? So this is the model for this list. So for now, I'm just going to add only a text view to understand things better. Then we will add an image later. So right now I'm going to add a new Kotlin files. For that, go to the model package, right click, new, and let's create a new Kotlin class. I'm going to name it affirmation. And inside this, I'm going to give the keyword data before the class, and I'm going to accept. I'll explain in a minute what are we doing right now. I'm going to accept a string resource ID of type integer. So what are we doing right now? So if you are going to do this in Java, what you will do is you will create a class called affirmation. Then you write a constructor. Then you write a constructor plus some getters and setters and everything. But just by adding this data keyword, all this is done in a single line. How cool is that? So this is the major advantage of using Kotlin. You will reduce the boilerplate code a lot. So you just add the data keyword and everything is handled automatically. So later we will be adding an image ID also here. This string resource ID refers to this particular string IDs. We will be passing that here. So this is the model for this data class. Now we need a data source, right? So what is the data source? In a real life application, when you build an app, you will be getting the data from internet, you will be calling an API or something, and there will be different sources of data, right? But the application doesn't need to know what is the actual structure or what was the original structure of the data. It just needs to process whatever things that it needs. So that's why we are not messing up main activity class with the source from internet, the structure and everything is not done within main activity, because the main activity will become very long and it will become very difficult to read later. That's why we are organizing everything into different packages and keeping it separate so that it makes more sense when you read later. Yeah, now we are going to create a new class called data source within this data package. So I'm going to right click data, the new Kotlin class, and I'm going to name it data source. So this class is going to be the data source for this application. We are not going to call any API in this particular application. We are just having a local a static data set. And inside this, we are having a function called load affirmations, which is going to return a list of type affirmation. So this affirmation comes from this model class affirmation, and we are going to return a list of type affirmation. And I'm just going to copy this from the notepad so that we don't spend much time here typing everything. So what are we doing here? We just need to import this R. Okay. So what are we doing here? You're just returning a list of affirmation objects. So this affirmation is this particular data class. You're just creating objects of this affirmation class by just passing each string ID. So affirmation 1 is this particular code, 2 is this, and so on. So you're just having 10 objects or 10 items inside this list. And when you call this load affirmations, you will be returning this list of affirmation. And yeah, this is the data source for this application. Now, what we are going to do right now is we are going to the XML file. Let's go to the split view, and I'm just going to remove this text view. For this particular application, we are going to use something called frame layout instead of constraint layout. So I'm just typing frame layout here, and everything else remains the same. And now we are going to add something called a recycler view. For that, I'm just typing recycler, and it just fills in with this recycler view. And I'm just giving width and height as match parent and closing this. Also, I'm going to give an ID, RV affirmations. We're going to give something called layout manager. So what is a layout manager? We'll see in a minute. And I'm going to give the value as linear layout manager. So what is a linear layout manager? We need the recycler view to have items arranged in a vertical fashion, right? So that's why we are using a linear layout manager. We can also have something like a grid. Then you can use the grid layout manager. Then there's also something called staggered layout, and you can try different layout managers. For this particular application, we are just going to use the linear layout manager. Okay. So also we need to scroll within the recycler view. If the cards are below outside the screen, you just need to scroll down. So we are going to add scroll bars vertical so that you can scroll vertically. So this is pretty much it inside the XML file. You don't have much things to write here. Now we are going to create another file inside this layout folder, this res layout. You are going to create a new layout resource file, and I'm going to name it list_item. It creates a layout for XML file for you. I'm just going to replace this constraint layout with a text view, and I'm giving this height and width wrap content, and I'm going to give an ID TV title. So why did I create a list item.xml file here? This is going to be the design of each single item inside your recycler view. So actually we need an image view and a text view inside a card view. So this is how it should look like finally But for now, I'm just adding a text view. We'll add an image later. So I added a text view and gave an ID. Now let's create an adapter. So what is an adapter? An adapter binds the data to the view holder. So I will explain it simply. Like you have different items on this list, right? So this recycler view has different items and you're getting this data from your data source. And the adapter is the one that handles that which item should go in which position. And when you scroll down, it should get the new data, right? So this is how recycler view works. When you scroll down, the current view is replaced with new data. It just reuses the view so that it has better performance. So that's why it is very much better than the older list view that we had. So that's how recycler view works. It is adapter which handles which data goes into which position and things like that. And we are going to create an adapter for this recycler view. For that, go to the adapter package, right click, new, and new Kotlin file, and I'm going to name it item adapter. Okay. So inside this item adapter, I'm going to accept two parameters, which is going to be named context. We need context to get a string resource from strings.xml. Just import context. Then we have data set, which will be of course a list of affirmation, private val. Oh, okay. I just added val here. It should be like this, private val. Okay. I'm just creating an item adapter which will accept this context and data set. Okay, so this data set is a list of affirmation, that is this list of strings that we have here. And we have a context which will be used to extract the string resource from the strings.xml file. And now I'm going to create another class called item view holder inside this item adapter. So this is called a nested class, and this is going to be used within this class only. And I'm going to accept some attributes, accept an attribute called view, which will accept a view as its parameter. Just import view. And it is going to inherit from recycler view dot view holder, and I'm going to pass this view. So we have seen this earlier, right? This is inheritance. This item view holder class is inheriting from recycler view dot view holder class. So this recycler view is coming from this Android X package, and this item view holder class is inheriting from recycler view dot view holder, and I am passing this view to this particular class. Yeah, now you can access text view here. It is going to be view dot find view by ID. It's going to be a text view r dot id dot tv. Can we import this tv title? So when this comes from this list item.xml file, this tv title is this thing. Okay, so you might be wondering how this list item.xml has a connection with item adapter. I'll clear that in a minute. Now we are going to add a parent class here. So this item adapter should inherit from recycler view dot adapter, and it will be of type item adapter dot item view holder. Okay, so it shows an error here because we haven't implemented all its methods. So I just pressed Alt Enter and click on implement members, then select all these unimplemented members and then click OK. So it just creates the function that should be overridden on create view holder, on bind view holder, and get item count. We will look into each one of this. So let's see get item count. So what does this get item count? It should return the number of items that we have in the list. So we are going to return dataset dot size when it calls get item count. So this dataset is this thing, the list of affirmations. And inside this on create view holder, we are going to declare something called an adapter layout, which is going to be layout inflator dot from parent dot context. So this is the context of this parent view group dot inflate r dot layout dot list item. So this is how you're connecting this particular XML file with this adapter. You're just inflating this individual list item, then you're passing the parent view and passing a boolean called false, which is attached to root, which means recycler view handles it automatically, like it is adding the view to the view holder automatically. You don't need to attach it to the root. That's why we are passing false here. And we have to return item view holder, return item view holder, and pass adapter layout there. Okay, so we just completed on create view holder here. And now let's implement this on bind view holder, which means the view holder has been binded. And this is where we write what text should be shown at each position. So as you can see here, there is an item view holder object and the position, the current position. What we are going to do is we are going to get an item from the dataset at this particular position. So this is how you access list item at this particular position. This is square brackets. And you're going to set the text view. For that, you are going to use holder dot text view. So this holder comes from here and this text view is this thing. And you are going to set the text as, and now you're going to use this context because you need to extract the string resource. So context dot resources dot get string. And here you are going to pass item dot string resource ID. So what just happened? You just accessed the list item at this particular position from this data set, and you are extracting string resource from that particular ID and setting it to corresponding text view. So that is what we are doing here right now. So this is how the adapter looks like. I'm just pressing Ctrl-Alt-L to just format. We just created a class called item adapter, which accepts context and the dataset. Then you have an inner class called item view holder, where you define the IDs of whatever views that you have. Then you inherit from recycler view adapter here and implement these on create view holder, on bind view holder, and get item count methods. In on create view holder, you just inflate this particular list item layout file and return the view holder. On bind view holder, you set the data to each position. Then inside the get item count, you just return the size of the data set. So this is how you make the adapter. So I'll just give a quick recap of what we did right till now. We just added some strings to the strings.xml file. Then we created 3 packages inside this main package called adapter, data, and model. Then we added a model class inside the model package, and it was named affirmation, which accepts a string resource ID. Then we created a data source where you have a function to return this list of affirmations. Then you made an adapter which handles the logic with the recycler view and the data source. Now let's go to the main activity and let's connect the adapter and our recycler view. Okay, let's define our data set right now. So it is going to be, let's say, call it my data set is equal to data source. Make sure that this data source is from your project itself. Data source dot affirmations. So you're just calling this function from your data source inside this particular my data set. Now you have a recycler view. I'm going to r.id RV information. Do you remember this ID from our activity main? This is the ID. Okay, and now let's define the adapter. So recycler view dot adapter is equal to, so this dot adapter means dot set adapter. It is going to be the item adapter. We are just creating an object of item adapter, and you're going to pass context as this, and you're going to pass the data set. Okay, so you have an adapter right now, and we are going to set something called recycler view dot set has fixed size as true, because since this is a local data set and it is going to have a fixed number of items, we are just having set has fixed size as true. But this may not be the case all the time. You can add this line according to your project. So in this particular case, we have fixed data set, so that's why we are giving this as true. And yeah, now let's try running this. It is running the Gradle build. So by that time, you can download the images shown in here. We will send you the link inside the chat. So download these files. There should be 10 image files. I have it downloaded already on my device on downloads. You can see. So these are the images. We are going to add this to our app soon. Yeah, yeah. Cool. So we have a list of text here with all the text that we had in the strings.xml file. So we are successful till now. And now we are going to add an image to this list item. For that, let's go here, and I'm going to add something called a linear layout, which is used to basically arrange your views in a horizontal or a vertical fashion. I'm going to use a linear layout, and I'm just copying this, pasting this here. Just press Alt Enter, and you have to copy this namespace also. And close this. Okay, so we just placed the text view inside this linear layout. Let's give the width as match parent, which means it will just fill the width, and height as wrap content. It will adjust according to the content. We have a text view here. We need an image view above this, right? So for that, inside the linear layout, I'm going to give something called orientation. So that is an attribute called orientation. I'm giving it as vertical because we need the text below the image. So if you needed the text right to the image, you should give horizontal. Okay, and now we are going to add an image view here with width match parent, and let's say height of 194 dp, and it should have an ID. I'm going to give img information, and scale type is going to be center crop. We have seen scale type and all in the birthday card app itself. And we need something called important for accessibility. We have seen this, right? In order to, or else we should add the content description. But this is not important for accessibility. This is just for kind of decoration, right? So we are just giving important for accessibility as no. Okay, so right now we have an image and a text view. I hope you have downloaded all these images. Let's select all these images, copy, come to our Android Studio project, go to this res drawable folder, and inside this paste, make sure that you select this drawable, not drawable version 24 or something. Just select drawable and click OK, and then again OK. Then you have all the 10 images in here, and we are going to slightly make some changes inside the affirmation class. We are going to make this image resource ID, which will also be of type integer. So we will be having an error inside our data source because we are not passing this image here. So I have copied that as well. So earlier we were passing only the string ID. Now we have to pass the image ID as well. So we have string and the corresponding image, string 2, image 2, and so on up to string 10 and image 10. Okay, so we have the data source ready. Let's get to the item adapter class, and we are going to initialize an image view here. Img view is equal to view dot find view by id is going to be an image view r dot id dot img affirmation, and inside this on bind view holder we are going to set the image holder dot image view dot set image resource, and it is going to be item dot image resource id. Now let's try running this. Yeah, it is running. Yeah, we have a list of images and a text. Our logic is working. Our layout is somewhat ready, but it surely needs some polishing from our side. We will do that pretty soon. So yeah, so far so good. Let's add some padding for this list item. So let's go to the list item.xml and add a padding for this linear layout of 16 dp, and let's just try running this. Okay, so we have a padding here, and as we said earlier, we need a card view surrounding this linear layout. So for that, I'm going to add a card view here. So it is going to be material card view, and I'm going to copy this entire thing, and I'm going to place all these things inside this card view, and I'm giving a margin of 8 dp. Okay, now let's try running this. Yeah, we have a card with the text. You can try adjusting the margin between text view. For example, I want a margin top of 8 dp. You can give anything you like. You can change the color of the text, size of the text, font weight, anything that you like. It's all up to you. So we have this running. Our final app looks something like this. Okay, so we have a recycler view of image and text. And right now what we are going to do is we are going to change the theme color of this app. So let's see, for till now we just used only this purple color, right? So how do we change this color of the toolbar and the status bar? For that, we are going to go to the colors.xml, and we are going to add two colors over here. How do you add a color? You just give color name as, I will just get the hex codes for this color. So these all are hexadecimal codes for color. You might be familiar with this. Okay, so we have, let's say, blue 200 head of code, this particular thing. I will paste this in chat so that you can. Okay, we have blue 200. We need blue 500 and blue 700. Two 1963. One 976 D2. Okay, so we have three colors here. So these are the colors that we need for this particular app. And now we are going to themes.xml, and you're going to give color primary as blue 500 and color primary variant as blue 700. Let's now try running this. Okay, we changed the color of the toolbar and the status bar. So what did we just do? We just added three colors to this colors.xml file. So why are we adding these colors to the colors.xml file? So that you can, wherever you need these colors, you can just call this @color/ this particular name, so that you have uniform colors throughout your application. And you're setting the theme here. So you can also set colors like for toolbars in individual screens, but it is not a good practice, because when you're setting a theme, all the toolbars will have a same color, so that if you want to change the color, you just change it here and it changes everywhere else. That's how themes work. Now there is something called themes.xml night, which is basically used for night mode or dark mode. We are going to use the same things for now inside dark mode as well. Okay, so we are done with changing the color. Now let's see how this app looks inside the app drawer. Okay, so inside the app drawer, if you see, this is the affirmations app that we just built, but it has an icon of an Android logo, right? But what if we need some other logo for your app? So that is the case. Whenever you build an app, you will be having an icon or a logo for your app, right? So we are just going to change the default icon. For that, you can download these two files. I will share the link for this as well in the chats. IC launcher foreground.xml and IC launcher background.xml. And after downloading this, let me know in the chats when you are done. And after downloading this, what we are going to do is we are just going to remove these files from the drawable folder. And you're going to click on right click, new image asset. And in here, you have to select icon type as launcher icons, and don't change the name or anything. Just come down to this path part and just click on this little folder icon. You can just browse your files. Then it will just load the file tree and go to your downloads folder. Should be inside your users folder, downloads. We will be having those XML files here. So we are looking for foreground. Yeah, I see launcher foreground. Just press OK. and click on background layer and click once again browse the files. Just scroll down to users and then your downloads, or wherever you have downloaded that file you can select that path and background. Okay, so this is the icon for or the logo for our app. Let's click on next. It should see like an icon with the same name already exists and will be overwritten. It's fine. So before we do this, let's just cancel this for now and let's check the map folder here. You have some files inside this IC launcher, right? We're just going to delete all these inside this IC launcher thing. We have just cleared the map folder. Once again, just let's create this image asset. I'm just going to select the foreground as well as the background. You have the foreground here, then the background layer, users, downloads. Okay, so this is your logo. Now click on next and then click finish. Let's now try running this and let's see if we have made any changes. Yeah, we have changed the logo for our affirmations app. So this is how you set your custom image as a logo for your application. And we are pretty much done with this affirmations app. We just created a recycler view with an image and a text view. And we just saw how adapters work for recycler view and why we are having different packages for adapter, data, and model to better organize your code, and how data models work and things like that. Yeah, we are done with affirmations app also. Great job. Great job, guys. I hope you are following with me. If you're having any issues, let us know in the chats. Okay, now let's move on to the next part of our today's session. It is navigation. What is navigation? Navigation basically means navigating from one screen to another inside your app. So you might be having multiple screens inside an app that you're going to develop, right? So how do you take user from one screen to another? We have multiple ways of doing this, and we will be looking at some of them today. And yeah, you might have noticed till now we have developed apps with only one screen, but right now we are going to try out an app with multiple screens and how to take users from one screen to another. Before we get into this, I will explain a little about what is an activity and what is an intent. Before that, I want all of you to download the starter code for this particular app so that we don't spend much time in designing all these activities and writing adapters and everything. We already have a starter code provided inside this course, Android Basics in Kotlin course that you are following. So I will paste the link in the chats right now. Go to that link, download this. It is a GitHub link. You can go to this code and download the zip file. It'll give you 2 minutes to download this starter code. You can download this zip to wherever you like. I have already downloaded it inside my downloads folder. I have this. You can extract this zip, and once you are done, go to Android Studio. We are going to import this project into our Android Studio. I hope you have downloaded the starter code by now. Okay, once you have downloaded, go to File, New, and Import Project. We are not going to start a new project. We are just going to import an existing project. Click on Import Project and go to the location where you have downloaded this starter code. For me, it is inside this Downloads folder. So I'm going to select this project and click on OK. It will open the project inside Android Studio, and it will run the Gradle build. May take a little time. Okay, let's take a look at what all things are already available here. We have detail activity, letter adapter, main activity, and word adapter, which are all Kotlin files already made for us. So we have a main activity, we have a detail activity, we have a word adapter and a letter adapter. So let's take a look at what are we looking at right now. We're going to build this app where a user can select a letter from this list. There is a list of letters, and a user can select a letter here, and it will show words that start with that particular letter inside this screen. So this is how it should work. There are two screens here. Basically, this is the main activity, this is the detail activity. So what is an activity? An activity, you can think of, in simple words, you can think of it as a screen that you see inside an application. So this is one activity, this is another activity. In this particular case, this is named main activity and this is named detail activity. And when a user clicks on a letter inside main activity, it should take you to the detail activity, which contains words that start with that particular letter. That's how it should work. What is an indent? Indent is the thing that takes you from this screen to the next screen. We call this an indent, and indent will have a source activity and a destination activity, and you can also pass some data through these indents. We will be seeing that how to do this thing. Let's get back to Android Studio. I'll close the old affirmations app. Okay, let's get to this main activity. Before we do anything, let's try running this and see how it works, what has been already done for us. We have two adapters also here. We have seen adapter in our previous example. Adapters for recycler view. We have two recycler views here. One for the list of letters and one for the list of words. That's why we have two adapters, letter adapter and word adapter. I think, yeah, we have this ready. We have a list of letters here, but when we click on this, nothing is happening. We should take the user to the next screen when they click here. We are going to do that right now. For that, let's go to this letter adapter once. We have seen this on bind view holder function earlier, right? So we are going to add these lines inside on bind view holder. For that, I'm going to do holder dot button dot set on click listener. So what is this button? So each letter that you see here is a button. How do we know that? We just go to this layout and there's a list item view .xml file. Inside this, you have a button. So this button is the list item for both these lists, this list of letters and list of words. You have button as the list item. So we are getting that button here and setting a click listener for that. So when a user clicks on that particular button, it should take to next screen, right? For that, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to get the context as holder.view.context, and I'm going to write something called indent is equal to indent. I'll explain in a minute what I'm doing. Just need to import this. And I want to take the user to detail activity. I'm going to use this syntax. So what are we doing here? We are creating an object of indent and I'm specifying the source, which is the current context. I want to take the user from this particular context, which means this particular main activity or this particular list to this detail activity. This is our destination. The user should go to this particular screen. So we are taking the user to this detail activity. This is the destination. And we need one more thing, right? We need to pass which letter was selected from the main activity to this detail activity, because the detail activity should know which letter was selected from main activity, right? For that, we are going to put some data into this indent. For that, we are going to use indent dot put extra. I'm going to give a key here called letter. This key should be same in both the source and destination activities. I'm going to retrieve this data using this key only, and the value should be folder dot button dot text to string. Okay, so what are we doing here right now? We are just putting a piece of data inside this indent using the key letter. So this data has a key letter and its value is going to be the text of the button selected. So when a user clicks on a button, we are passing the button's text and converting it to a string. The button's text is the letter A, B, C, or whatever thing the user selected. We're just passing that letter to the indent. And now we need to start this indent. So for that, we're going to use context dot start activity. I'm going to pass this indent object. Okay, let's now try running this. Let's now try clicking on this. Yeah, it takes us to the next screen, which is the detail activity showing words that start with that particular letter. But there is an issue here. Let's try clicking on some other letter. Still, it shows words that start with A. Why is this happening? Whichever letter you select, it always shows the detail activity with words that start with A. But this is not what we need, right? Let's go to detail activity. So inside detail activity, there is something called letter ID, which is hard coded as A. So it doesn't matter what you select inside main activity, it always shows words that start with A. But we need to change this. For that, we need to get the letter passed within this indent. We need to get this string inside this detail activity. So for that, we are going to do something like I'm going to remove this letter A here. I'm going to use intent question mark dot. I will explain what am I doing here right now. Not extras. Get string. I'm going to use the key letter. Finally converting it to a string. This letter, this key letter comes from this adapter letter. Okay, what are we doing here right now? This indent is not specific to this detail activity. It is present inside app combat activity. This indent is basically get indent, which means if this activity was launched from some other activity, it should have an indent, right? So we are getting that indent and we are checking the extra. So what we did here, we just put an extra, right? So we are getting those extras here and we are getting a string with this particular key letter and finally converting this to a string. You might have noticed this question mark here. This is because this intent or extras can be null. They are nullable fields. It can have null values. So if it is null value, we don't even try to get the extras. If the extras is a null value, we don't even try to get the string. So that's why we are using this null safe operator here. We're just using a question mark so that if it is null, we don't try to invoke any of this. If the extras is null, we don't try to do any of these things. So that's why we are using a null safe expression here. So that's it. We are getting the letter from this intent. Let's now try running this. Okay, now let's try clicking on B. Yeah, now it shows words that start with B. Now let's click on X. It shows words that start with X. So this is working perfectly as we needed. So this is how an intent work. To be specific, we did an explicit intent here, which basically means intent within your app itself, from one activity of your app to another activity of that same app itself. So that is working. So now what we are going to do is we are going to see how to make this implicit intent. So implicit intent, as we saw a few moments before, you might have seen dialogues like this: share to which, select the app to share this thing. So we are going to do this. For that, let's go to this word adapter. And let's go to on bind view holder here. And inside this, I'm going to add a click listener to the word button, holder.button dot set on click listener. And I'm going to write something called, let's give some name called query URI. It's going to be of type URI. URI.parse. We just want to take the user to a Google search with this word. Okay, so if the user clicks on about, it should open a browser with a Google search for this word about. So how are we going to do that? We are going to use google.com/search and query is equal to, here we are going to use string interpolation. We have seen this earlier. We are going to pass this item. So what is this item? This item is the text of this button, which basically means the word. So we are just passing the word as the query. Now we are going to write an intent. So if you remember, just before, inside this letter adapter, we were giving the context and our destination activity inside the indent. Right now, for implicit indent, we are going to use intent.action view and followed by this query URI. And then we are going to start this indent. Okay, so we just defined a URI to where the user should be taken. Okay, so what is a URI? URI is Uniform Resource Identifier, which consists of URL and URN. URL, you might be familiar with URL, Uniform Resource Locator, like this web address or this mail to. These our URL or uniform resource locator. There is something called URN also, uniform resource name. For example, this telephone number right here is a URN. So URI consists of both these things, uniform resource identifier or URI. That's why we have the type URI here. So it is not a typo or something. It is not URL, it is URI. We are defining a URI here using this URI.parse, and we are passing a string here. So this string is basically the web address that we need to take the user to. It is a Google search, and we are just adding this item selected by the user as the search query. And we are defining an indent with the indent type as indent.action view. This is an implicit indent, right? So, which means we are not taking the user to an activity present inside our app itself. We are just taking the user to an external link or external source. Then we are passing this query URI here, and then we are starting this activity. Let's now try running this and see how it works. Okay, we have the list of letters here. Let's select something. We have words that start with D. Let's click on development. Okay, it takes us to a Google search with the query development. So yeah, this is an implicit indent where it takes to some other source. So we did an explicit indent which takes you from this main activity to the detail activity, and then implicit indent where the user is taken to some external source. So yeah, this is how you navigate between screens using indent. So there are other ways to do this also. We will look into that. But for now, I hope it is clear to you how to use indents to take the user from one screen to another. Yeah. Now we have seen how to work with indents to navigate from one screen to another. Next up is navigation component, Jetpack navigation component. We will see how to use navigation graphs to handle navigation. So before that, let's take a break of 5 minutes. Just stretch out. We will be available in the chats. If you're facing any doubts or issues, feel free to post it in the chat section. We will be there to help you out. Let's take a small break of 3 to 4 minutes. Okay, let's get back to work. Now, what we are going to do right now is we have seen navigation using indents. Now we are going to use something called Jetpack navigation component, and we are going to use navigation graphs to handle navigation between screens. Before we move on to actually implementing this, let's see what is a fragment. So you might be familiar with this phone app, and there are four options here, right? Favorites, recents, contacts, and voicemail. When you click on any one of this option, it will show a screen here, right? What is happening here is it is not starting a new activity when you click on contacts or when you click on recents or any other option. It is just replacing the content here with a new screen, right? So these are basically fragments. So fragment is a piece of UI which you can reuse, and an activity can hold multiple fragments. So a fragment is different from an activity. An activity may contain multiple fragments. So in this particular example, you will be having four fragments for favorites, recents, contacts, and voicemail. So you will be having different fragments for these, and you will inflate fragments within these single activities. So this is a single activity containing different fragments. So fragment is a piece of UI that you reuse. Okay, so we have seen this words app, right? What we built, this words app, where a user selects a letter, and it takes the user to a detail screen where words starting with that letter is shown. We are going to implement this using fragments. So for that, let's get back to Android Studio. And before we move on to adding fragments, I will do one more thing inside the detail activity. I'm going to write something called companion object, and I'm going to declare a constant value called letter with the value letter. And instead of giving this get string letter directly, I'm going to use this letter variable here. And also inside this letter adapter, I'm going to use detail activity dot letter. So why am I using this? You don't need to remember what did you give here and then copy it to this detail activity. And when you have more number of data to pass, it is very difficult. So you are going to declare something called companion object. So what is a companion object? It is very similar to a symbol object, but this is kind of like a singleton object, which means you will be having only one instance for this object throughout your program. So that's why we are declaring this companion object here called letter, and you will be using this directly inside detail activity. And when you're using somewhere outside detail activity, you access it by calling detail activity dot that particular variable name. So we have just changed the key to use this companion object. Okay, now let's try to make fragments. For that, I'm going to right click on app. I'm going to right click on app and click on new fragment, and I'm going to add a blank fragment. I'm going to give its name as letter list fragment, and you click on finish. It will sync with the Gradle once. We will need one more fragment for the detail activity. We'll create that once this is done. For the first time, it will take a little time. Okay, and now I'm going to create another fragment. For that, I'm going to give new fragment, blank fragment, and I'm going to give its name as word list fragment. Okay, so right now we have two fragments, letter list fragment and the word list fragment. And you might have noticed it created XML files also for us for each of these fragments. And now let's go to the letter list fragment, and we will just clear these things for now. And let's come to here. I'm going to clear all these. Okay, so let's do the same with word list fragment also. I'm going to remove all these things. We clear this companion object also. Okay, now let's get to the XML part. I am opening the letter list fragments layout file. And instead of this text view, we are going to have a recycler view. Because what all things are in the activity main.xml file, we are going to keep it inside the fragment list, letter list. And what all things are in detail activity, we are going to have it in the fragment word list. So let's open this activity main.xml. Just copy this, all these things to fragment letter list. And inside this tools context, we are going to give it as dot letter list fragment. Okay, and everything else remain the same. Then let's go to fragment word list and copy the contents of activity detail in here. And I'm going to rename this tools context as word list fragment. Okay, so we just copy the contents of activity main to letter list fragment and activity detail to the word list fragment. Okay, so we are going to use view binding to get the views. We have seen how to use view binding in activities. Right now we are going to use view binding in fragment. So I'm going to define a private variable called underscore binding of type fragment letter list binding. So this class is automatically generated because since we have enabled view binding in our build.gradle file. And I'm going to make this nullable and define it as null. So if you are sure that this is going to be not null when you're actually accessing it, what you can do is you can have another variable binding followed by this keyword called get. It's going to be binding double exclamation mark. So this get means this value is get only. We can assign it, but once assigned, you cannot change this. You can get the value, but once assigned, you cannot modify. So what does this underscore binding followed by double exclamation means? It means this is not going to be null when you're going to actually accessing it, which is the case here. So notice that this binding does not have an underscore, and we are going to use this binding. Okay, so we just initialized the view binding here. Now let's come to this on create view. Here we are returning the inflator. Instead of this, we are going to return the root of binding. For that, what we are going to do right now is we are going to declare give the value for binding as fragment letterless binding dot inflate. This is very similar to what we did inside an activity. We are going to use inflator. This inflator is this thing, followed by the container and false is attached to parent. And then we are going to return this binding dot root. Okay, so not this binding, this one, because we are going to return a non-null thing. So we are going to return binding dot root. Okay. So this binding is this one without an underscore. We have given the value for underscore binding here, so it is not going to be null. So we get the binding here and we are returning binding dot root in onCreateView instead of directly inflating the layout by using r.layout that particular fragments layout file. And now we are going to have another variable for the recycler view. Just formatting this Control Alt L, and inside on view created. Okay, so if you don't have that function, you can always use Control O to see the list of functions that can be overridden. So inside that we need on view created. Just double click here. Inside this on view created, we are going to do this. Recycler view is equal to binding dot recycler. Just going to remove this. So this on view created came from the fragment class. We are overriding it. So if you want to override something, if you want to see the list of functions that can be overridden, you can always do the shortcut Control O and see the list of functions that you can override, and click on the one that you need and click OK. That's how we added on view created here. We also need on destroy view. I'm going to do the same thing on destroy view. We're going to set the binding as null. Okay, so we have set up the letterless fragment.kotlin file. What we did is we just used view binding inside a fragment. We are going to do the same with the word list fragment. So when we do that once again, you will be more familiar with the process. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to remove all these unused things. Okay, we are going to have a private variable called binding of type word list fragment word list binding, initializing it as null. Then we have another private value binding get and underscore binding double question mark. And here we are going to give the value for binding as fragment word list binding dot inflate inflator, then container false, and we are going to return this binding dot root. We need on view created here. We need on destroy view. Here we are going to set binding as now. We need that super dot on destroy view also. Okay. Also, we need everything inside detail activity here. So we are going to copy this companion object to here, and inside our adapter, it is we should give that companion object name. We're going to give this as word list fragment dot letter, because we are going to delete this activity files, because we don't need a separate activity right now. We are just doing within the single main activity with two different fragments. So we have set up these fragment letter list and fragment word list. Now we are going to add the Jetpack navigation component to our project. For that, let's go to our build.gradle file and add the following lines inside this dependency. I'm just going to copy it from the course. So this nav version comes from this build.gradle here. It is already present. Then let's also we will need something called safe args. I will explain what it is. So we need safe args also. We are going to add this to our project level and add this. Okay, we already have this here, so no need to add this again. We are syncing it. It will take a little time to download these dependencies. Okay. And let's go check the plugins. There we have safe args. We need a plugin here. I'm going to give the ID as Android X dot navigation dot safe args dot Kotlin. Okay, we have added the plugin. Now we are going to create something called a navigation graph. So what is a navigation graph? Navigation graph is basically an XML file defining your fragments and the connections with that. So we are going to add a new Android resource file. Of type navigation. and I'm going to give the name as nav graph. Click on OK. It gives us a different layout editor for this. We will come back to this. Let's get back to activity main and let's replace this recycler view with a fragment container view. Match parent, match parent. So this fragment container view is going to hold all of our fragments. In this case, we have two fragments, the letter list and word list. This view is going to contain both these fragments, and we are going to give it an ID of nav host fragment. Okay. And also we are going to add something called name as androidx.navigation.fragment.nav host fragment. I'm going to give the name as this, and also we are going to add default app. We're just adding that namespace declaration with app default nav host is true. And the nav graph going to be navigation/nav graph. Now let's get back to the navigation graph. We're going to add our fragment to this graph. For that, there is a plus icon here which reads new destination. Click on that. We will have all our fragments here. We are going to add fragment letter list here. Now then we are going to add our fragment word list. Okay, we have added our fragments to this graph. So how are we going to specify the connection between these fragments? We are just going to add an action from this letter list fragment to word list fragment. For that, there is a handle here. Just drag and drop it here. We just created an action from letter list fragment to word list fragment. So what is an action? Action is just navigating from this fragment to that. We have an action here. So this is an action. We have selected this action and it has all these attributes. The destination is word list fragment and the source is of course letter list fragment. We can also define animations here, the stack behavior, everything we can define it here. Right now we have just added an action here, and let's specify the arguments for word list fragment. The word list fragment expects a letter from this letter list fragment, right? So for that, we are going to add an argument. So here, let's select this word list fragment and inside the arguments, let's click on this plus icon here. And I'm going to give the name as letter and type is string. And let's click on add. So we have an argument here. And we are going to assign this as the start destination. So for that, click on this home button here, and this is the start destination. You see this small home icon here next to this letter list fragment. So this is the default fragment that is going to be inflated. And now we need to perform this action of going from this to this, right? So inside the letter adapter class, instead of this indent, we are just going to remove this indent. Instead, we are going to define something called action. is equal to letter list fragment directions. So this letter list fragment directions class is created by the navigation Jetpack navigation component. This is similar to when we did view binding, it created classes automatically for us, right? So this navigation component also adds classes called fragment directions so that we can access the actions within the navigation graph. Letter list fragment directions and dot action letter list fragment to word list fragment. So this is the action that we defined in here, this particular action. Let's get back to letter adapter, and it is expecting an argument, right? So we are going to use letter is equal to, it is going to be holder dot button dot text dot toString. So we have defined the action here. Now we need to perform this action, right? For that, what we are going to do is holder dot view dot find nav controller dot navigate action. So it is going to find the navigation controller from the holder's view, and we are going to navigate using this particular action that we did right here. So we don't need this here. I'm just removing this. And now the only thing left is the main activity. So inside the main activity, I'm going to remove all these things. We don't need this. We need these things inside our letter list fragment. So I'm just pasting it here for now. You cannot pass this here. Why? Because this is a fragment and this is not a context itself. So you can use this require context inside this linear layout method, so it will get the context from its parent activity. Okay, and we are setting the adapter as letter adapter. Cool. So we just move that to the fragment, and right now we don't need this also. I'm removing that. We need to define the nav host fragment here. For that, I'm going to give nav host fragment is equal to support fragment manager dot find fragment by id not id dot nav host fragment as nav host fragment. Then just typecasting this as nav host fragment. Then I'm going to define a nav controller. So for that, I'm going to define here a private late init variable nav controller. This is going to be of type nav controller. And I'm giving the value for this nav controller as nav host fragment dot nav controller. So we have just set up this nav host fragment inside our activity main in this activity main.kotlin file. So we have set up this thing. We need to do one more thing to in your actual course, there is an option to switch layouts of the recycler view, like grid view and linear layout. You can try that out. If you're doing that, you should add one more line. Setup action bar with nav controller and pass this nav controller in there. If you are doing that also. For this particular example, I'm just going to demonstrate this navigation only, and we are not doing that action bar thing here. If you are doing that, you can do that. Now we need to get the arguments inside our word list fragment. So let's go to word list fragment, and inside that, I'm going to define private late init variable as letter ID, and it is going to be of type string. And inside this, let's come to this on create. Okay, inside this on create, what we are going to do is arguments question mark dot, which means we are just checking for null, dot let we are going to give the value for letter ID. If the arguments is not null, we are going to get the letter ID from this thing, get string letter. So this letter is from this companion object letter dot to string. Okay, so we are getting this letter ID from the arguments for this fragment. So we have defined the arguments inside the navigation graph, right? For this word list fragment, there is an argument called letter. So we are getting that argument inside this word list fragment by these lines of code. We are getting assigning that value to this letter ID variable. And then we need to set the recycler views things here. So let's go to detail activity once and copy this recycler view. We were in word list fragment, and inside the on view created, I'm just copying all these things. We cannot pass this here. I'm going to pass require context everywhere. Just passing this letter ID that we got from this arguments. Okay, so let's now try running this and let's see if everything is working. Just building the project. By that time, I will give a quick overview of what we did so far in this example. We created two new fragments called letter list fragment and word list fragment, which are basically in the previous example, main activity and detail activity. It automatically created XML files for us, fragment letter list, fragment word list. Inside fragment letter list, we added a recycler view. Inside this, we added a recycler view also. Which basically means we copied the contents from activity main to this fragment letter list and activity detail to the word list. And then we there was already this item view.xml already there. Then we created a navigation graph. So navigation graph is basically a graph of fragments that you have in your application, and you define the actions between these fragments. So you want to navigate from letter list fragment to word list fragment, you add an action from letter list fragment to word list fragment, and you have attributes here. Then for the word list fragment, we add an attribute argument called letter. So because it is expecting a letter from this fragment. And then inside our letter list fragment Kotlin class, we implemented on create view, on view created, and on destroy view. We used view binding. We saw how to use view binding inside a fragment. And we just defined another variable called binding, which is not null. And we inflated the layout. Inside the on view created, we set up the recycler view with its layout manager and adapter. The same thing is happening inside the word list fragment file. We have the same companion object from the detail activity. Then we have a binding. Inside on view created, you are setting the adapter for the recycler view with the letter ID that you got from the previous fragment. So let's now try this. Yeah, it is working. So this is, we are staying within a single activity, but we are getting two different fragments. So this is the letter list fragment, this is the word list fragment, and it is being shown on the same activity. So this is how it is working. Cool. So this is navigation graph component. It is much easier to handle navigations using this navigation graph because you can add all your fragments or all your activities inside here and define the actions between these screens, and you can, it automatically generates classes for you. This directions class, if you remember, we added inside this letter list fragment, no, letter adapter. We add this action, and this letters list fragment directions class was automatically generated for us so that we can access the corresponding actions. Then we can pass the arguments. So that's how navigation graph works. So we saw how to use indents to navigate between screens, also how to use navigation graph. I hope you found it useful. We will wait for some more time for you to catch up, and if you're facing any issues, let us know in the chats. We'll be really happy to help you out. We are posting the link to Telegram group once again. If you haven't joined this group yet, join it now. We will be discussing things about the program there. Also, we will discuss about your queries, doubts, or any issues that you're facing. We will be helping you guys out. So if you haven't joined this group yet, join it now. I think we can wrap up for today. We will meet in the next session of Android Study Jams and build more apps. So yeah, if you have any other queries or doubts, feel free to post it in the Telegram group. We will be there. So let's see in the next session. Thank you all. Bye. See you soon.